a North Cornish town with programs just for you. The Launceston Podcast.
Well, listeners, I'm going to a very interesting person, Andrew Langdon. Yes, over the years he's been starred our lovely Cornish county of Cornwall with historic crosses. You may find them several places on the byways and side roads or in the towns or the cities. There are some coming to Cornish Launceston. There is one on the east side of St Mary's Church. Actually, that's a Landgon cross in 1978. But also, actually, in Launceston, there was also, was moved actually, it was the King Edward VII's coronation in 1902, but it's still there, but it's been moved around a little bit because in 1974 they moved it because of safety and keeping. But I've got Andrew with me today actually, and they'll tell you a bit interesting about the other crosses actually in our Cornwall county of Cornwall and Colonel. Basically one of them is down there around the trail of the High Cross, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, I think the cross down outside the cathedral was the latest one where we've had to do restoration work, and that was a major job. It was hit and demolished by a vehicle back in February 2019.
It took a lot of work to do, didn't it, to restore it back to its natural state, and what people will see it today?
Yes, yeah, I mean, say it's a cross that was only discovered in 1958, buried in St Thomas Street, and it came to the notice of Mr Douch, the curator of the museum, and he rescued it, and he considered it to be the Truro Borough cross of 1290, and it was set up outside the museum for a year or so, and then it was removed and set up on the base on the west side of the cathedral in the little flower border, and then in 1981 it was brought out into the cobbled area known as High Cross, and then one of the mayors, John Christie, in 1987 to 8, he considered that the cross was too short because it was only a short piece, about 4 foot, and he thought it should be lengthened to 10 feet. So in 1987 it was taken up to Hantagantic Quarry. It's secured and lengthened by 6 feet to give a total height of 10 feet. On the 20th of February 1989 it was hit by a digger where it was doing telecoms work outside the cathedral, and then that was repaired, and then exactly on 30 years later, on the 20th of February 2019, a vehicle hit the cross, hit it down at low level. It snapped off at ground level. The jolt of the power of the vehicle broke the joint between the medieval and the modern shaft. So the medieval section, the head and upper part of the shaft, fell to the ground. That broke into 2 pieces. So it was quite a disaster. It was broken into 4 pieces. The lower part still fixed in the ground.
I believe me, so it looks like a sort of some foreign sort of cross, or a character cross, is it?
It's got a diagonal or St Andrew's style cross, so it is similar to the one at St Piran, the Freehold cross at Great Bridge, also one down in Leland churchyard.
It must cost a lot of money actually to restore these actual items, and they're in the centre of, like say, in the centre of Truro, just across from the cathedral. But it must have been, it was knocked down. It must have been a lot of expense actually to restore and actually take it away bit by bit, and so then put it up like a jigsaw, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, it was very much a challenge, and I got involved with it through the Cornwall Archaeological Unit.
Yeah.
And we had Alex and Ian Piper and Peter Hooper from Piper's Stonemasons up at Beera Tor Quarry at North Hill to do the repairs. But first of all, we had to arrange scheduled monument consent and get permission from Historic England. Cormac were involved, Truro City Council Garden Department collected bits of the cross, stored it for several months, and eventually, when all the permissions were agreed, back in the end of November, Alex Piper came down from Beerator Quarry and picked up the 3 parts of the cross on the trailer, took them up to Beerator. There, they were drilled and pinned, and the 3 parts pinned back together again with stainless steel pins, and then another pin set in the bottom of it. And then early in December, they came down one morning early because we didn't want to disrupt the city.
Yeah.
So Alex and his father Ian came down and started work in drilling the bottom piece that was still in the ground, 7 o'clock in the morning, and then drilled that hole, and then 2 weeks later they came down with the cross, quite a major job in lifting it, making sure that it was aligned correctly, doing a bit of a dummy run, setting it up without any glue or mortar, making sure it fitted correctly before then gluing the mortar and it's back in place.
So I see now all the work now, Andrew, actually, now you see all the work now, people can actually see it now in across the road from the cathedral. But also, what's the actual long tom in the Minions near Liscard? A stone called Long Tom?
Yes, yeah, well that's a medieval wayside cross. It could have started out as a Bronze Age menhir, because with most crosses the wheel head obviously protrudes further on each side of the shaft, but with Long Tom it's almost in line with the shaft, and it could have started out life as a prehistoric standing stone, and then had a wheel head carved on it.
There was a wheel cross actually in Ocean London, isn't there?
There's one just inside the churchyard gate, a head and an original base stone. The shaft is Victorian. Many of the crosses throughout the county were extensively restored in the Victorian period. Many of the churchyard crosses with scroll work on, with interlaced decoration, these originally marked a Christian burial ground, possibly prior to a church being built. And by the 15th, 16th century, as churches were rebuilt, extended with aisles and towers, many of these crosses have fallen out of fashion and were broken up and built into the fabric of the church. And then in the Victorian period, when there was another big boom in church restoration, these crosses were rediscovered, built into the fabric of the church,
Yeah.
and Victorians restored them in our churchyard. So places like Cardinham, the wonderful churchyard cross, the scroll work on outside the south porch, that was discovered in 1872, built into the external chancel wall of the church.
There is a cross actually the Roman Catholic Church over in Launceston actually. There's a cross actually to the Andrew Langdon, the canon of Andrew Langdon actually outside the church, or just there before the steps, isn't there? That's an interesting cross, isn't it?
Yeah, well that's so that's Charles Basketball Langdon, who was the first Catholic priest there.
Any relation to you?
No, not I know of, but his brother, Arthur Gregory Langdon, wrote a book in 1896 called Old Cornish Crosses, and he was the expert on Cornish crosses in the Victorian period, and his work was seen as the definitive work on Cornish crosses.
I mean, so these crosses you see today, actually, you look at them, you go over, you walk down on the stroll route to the car, get in the car, and it's a bit of walking, actually. And a lot of the crosses came from Brittany and Wales, didn't they?
Mainly connections with Ireland and Wales for for crosses down in West Cornwall, ones with crucifix figures of Christ on the cross. You've got more possible links and comparison with Wales and Ireland. Those in East Cornwall that have got scroll work on, like the cross at Cardinham, which I just mentioned, also at Llywelyn and Hyde Rock, those are more comparable with crosses up in the north of England. You don't find scroll work on crosses much in Ireland and Wales. It's mainly in the north of England. So you've got links coming from all parts, really. I mean, say all the crosses down west. You know, you're talking about maritime links with kind of Wales and Ireland.
I believe actually a lot of people actually when they travel down the A30 actually go towards Cornwall. Not up there, on a hill. That was like a cross, isn't it? It's a monument actually to the Bassett family.
Yeah.
But that looks like a cross as well, isn't it? Really, that's not sort of the thing to a cross, is it?
No, I mean, say I suppose it's more a monument than what I would term a cross today, because you can actually climb up inside it.
Yeah. Bodmin's got sort of famous one, haven't they?
Bodmin's got the Cardinham cross, which is out on the roundabout, just as you pull off the A30 to take the A38 road to Landgon. On that roundabout, in the centre of the roundabout, you've got Carminno Cross, and this cross originally marked the boundary of three parishes, Hyde Rock, St Petrock's Bodmin, and Cardinham. Today, Cardinham doesn't get as far as the cross, but in the past, in 1613, it's recorded as being a boundary marker to all three parishes.
The really look cross, actually, that's St Column, isn't there?
A wonderful churchyard crosshead on the east side of the churchyard there, and that's a four-holed cross, and it's one that's been copied many times for church memorials, for war memorials, because at the end of the First World War, there was an interest in commemorating all those soldiers that were lost, and the idea was to actually design war memorials, many of which are based on ancient crosses around Cornwall.
They're not always actually crosses you actually find in churchyards, because a lot of these crosses have got a reason for me to be there, haven't they?
Yes, I mean, say, the churchyard crosses have marked a Christian burial ground.
Yeah.
Some of them are inscribed, so they may have been set up to commemorate Mr. Big in the area, whether that was a priest or a secular lord. Some of them, the tall ones, would have acted as a focal point for congregations to gather. If you think about Crivic, you've got the tallest cross above ground level, it's 13 foot 4 inches, and it's the St Tess cross in the cemetery measures 13 foot 1 inch. So then tall crosses and would have been a focal point for people to gather around.
You've actually wrote books on book crosses, haven't you?
Through the Federation of Old Cornwall Societies, I've written a series on kind of 5 areas.
You're also the president of the Cornwall Societies?
I'm the deputy president.
You're also a Cornish bard?
Yes. I was made a Cornish bard, 30 years ago now, for my work on research and restoration of Cornish crosses, and that is what I've carried on and done most of my adult life.
So your bard name must be actually something to do with crosses?
Yes, it's Depreus Crozo, which is protector of crosses.
What sort of made you get interested in these? I know you're interested in Cornish culture, county customs and that sort of thing. What sort of made you get in actually to these sort of crosses? I mean, a lot of people actually sort of walk past them and leave them alone, and not. But there must be a reason why you must have got involved with these crosses. Actually, we gather up things that leave nothing left behind and nothing to be lost. But why do you feel yourself with these crosses? You must touch you must be able to touch one of the crosses and tell, well, some of these crosses must be, Andrew, actually, for people who couldn't see, they could feel the cross and tell the stories, the stories of the cross. Is that the idea you may have thought of, I'll search these and make sure they don't die out?
Well, I think it all started at school, really, with having to stand up in school and speak for 3 minutes on a subject. And I had a Cornish upbringing in the Wadebridge area, so I would walk out and cycle out in the countryside, and often in the St. Kew area, St. Endelion and St. Maven, we would pass stone crosses, and they kind of fascinated me from school days, really.
What's your interest in cross?
I suppose there's so many that I could pick out as being
one low to none?
Yes, yeah. There's several in the parish of Alton, but there are many in Lisland and St. Brewood. I think some of the best crosses are those that have not been moved, which are still in their original position.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful cross up at Tresini in the parish of Advent, which marks the route to the parish church coming from St. Brewood, and that's a cross that's nearly 9 foot high, wheel-headed cross, and still in its original base, still on the church path, marking the route to the church, and it hasn't been damaged at all, and is, as it was set up really in the medieval period.
What do you think about this new modern cross, actually? As you go down the Soul Ash, as you go over the bridge, you see this big blue thing sticking up in the air.
Well, it's completely different. Actually, I've met the designer of the cross in the past, who repaired to a cross at Tregoodwell in Camelford. But I don't think really you can compare the two. That's a modern structure. It's a different type of monument. But I don't think really you can compare it with the ancient crosses of Cornwall. But many crosses have been set up in Cornwall in recent years, and I think some people have had crosses carved and set up in their grounds, and there's a little bit more to do with cultural identity rather than with religion. Whereas these crosses originally were all religious monuments, all linked in one way or another to the church. Today the Cornish cross is very much seen as a cultural symbol to Cornwall, and is often used by different organisations to say we are Cornish, and many of the modern crosses that have been set up, quite a few at the time of the millennium, again they're seen more as cultural symbols as much as religious symbols.
Can you still get all your books?
Some of them, through the Federation of Old Cornwall Societies. If you Google Federation of Old Cornwall Societies, we've got a kind of bookstall on our website. And some of them are still available. Others are out of print.
Can you still actually get them in a shop at all?
In some shops they can order them if they haven't got them.
It must take you a lot of time actually, strolling around the countryside. You don't walk everywhere, do you?
No. I think my biggest expense is travelling around, because when a cross gets damaged, it doesn't matter if it's up at Salt Ash or down at Sennan. I tend to get involved one way or another, and sometimes it takes many visits before a cross is repaired. It depends on circumstances. It depends whether it's protected, got different permissions. If it's a cross in the churchyard, you need a faculty. You might need scheduled monument consent. You might need listed building consent, and all these things mean going to meetings site meetings and so forth to try to get a good result.
Is there any crosses actually covering Mitchin and soft silky moss and brambles anymore? Or are they all cleared up?
Oh no. I mean, say all the lichens or lichens, they cover many crosses. I mean, say because these crosses have been outside, some of them for 1,000 years, you cannot kind of remove them as such. I mean, say the lantern cross outside the Mary Magdalene Church there, I cleaned a few years ago because it was under a tree. The tree's been cut down now, but that was covered in moss. Now, moss isn't good for the cross because it holds the water.
Yeah.
And if you got water in amongst joints and you get frost, you got the chance of damaging the cross. Lichens are a different thing. You can, with that cross up at the lantern cross up at Launceston, I removed with a toothbrush the top surfaces so that I could see the sculpture. But you cannot start rubbing too much into the stone because with a lot of the lichens or lichens, you actually would start removing the surface of the stone.
Would you
got to accept that's part of the natural process. And today, people would be concerned if you did remove some of these because they can be kind of rare plants in themselves.
If you go up to Provence, right, you go to Jamaica Lane and go across the road there, you go down the lane towards St. Clear, there's a stone there with that King Donut stone. Is that that would be a part of an old cross, you know?
Yeah, and one of the earliest. It is what I would say a kind of pedestal or a base stone of the cross. And it would have had additional sections which would have been mortise and tenon above.
It'd be interesting to see if there's any other plot line around there, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, say, I think over the years they've searched, but nothing's come to light. No doubt, it was in many cases these stones would have been broken up and used for other purposes.
Oh, thank you, Andrew, for talking to me today. I know it's very interesting, actually, because listeners out there will be interested, and when they come out of hospital and go, they may find one of your books at the Old Cornwall Society, and also they may decide to become a member of the Old Cornwall Society themselves, because there's a lot of branches in Cornwall, and also they may like to go out and do a few walks yourself in nice weather, sort the crosses out, and actually I believe all the crosses are actually listed and also catalogued, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. Most of them are listed or scheduled and protected, some with microchips as well.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much.
You take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
The Launceston Podcast.